All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. We're talking about TNXP today. We're talking about the stock that we've talked about on the channel since last year in 2024, as we watch a family of geese head off into the sunset. And it's really cool to watch these family of geese and how they just interact. You know, they always are together. I love seeing it. You know, it's like a clan. And they're just walking together. You have the male, the female, the children, everybody. I don't even know if you guys can see that on camera, but they're out there right now. You can see 4 of them. And I just love how it's so cool to watch. But with that being said, thank you all for tuning in to this video. Today we're talking about returns in the market. We're talking about how you can make potential whatever type of returns you're seeking. And when I say that, think about TNXP. You know, we've talked about TNXP in the market. We've talked about this stock because the stock has potential. Let's be completely honest. You know, the stock has been trending in a fashion that if you look back at October of 2024, when we were truly discussing this stock on the channel initially, and the stock truly did have that potential to go up 10x or more, that's exactly what you saw. And when you saw 10x or more, that's exactly what happened. In fact, it went from under 20 cents a share to pretty much $2 a share, or just about. And in fact, when I started talking about it, it was at 13 cents. So the stock went up more than 10x from when we started talking about it. And especially in November, October, you know, even August and September, pretty much, we started talking about the company. And with that being said, the stock was undervalued. It was due for a run. And even now, you can look at the trading history and say, well, the stock has been doing good, or the stock has been doing this or that, depending on where it's trading at. But the stock started under 20 cents a share, or the equivalent. And the stock then did a reverse split. So it was basically a 100 or 1 for 100 reverse split, which basically means for every 1 share you own, or for every 100 shares you own, you only get 1 share back in return. So if you own 1 million shares, you only get 10,000. If you own 100,000 shares, you know, think about what you're getting. If you own 100,000 shares, you only get 1,000. It's 100 for 1. You're not getting much. So it sucks. Reverse splits are not fun. Nobody likes reverse splits. Nobody speaks positively of reverse splits, and yet they happen. Why is that? Because companies want to make money, and they don't want to have to deal with all the bullshit. You know, the point is, especially on the OTC, over-the-counter markets, you have all kinds of activity that happens. And so these are risks that you have to consider when you're investing in these types of securities, because these things do happen. But after the reverse split, you can look at the equivalent share price. You know, I've made several videos when TNXP was trading at 30 to 40 cents or the equivalent. You know, so it's still more than double or 2x what you could have bought it for before we started talking about it on the channel. And that's not to say that to brag or anything, but the point is, if you would have, you know, seen this stock back in June of 2024, you would be up probably a good amount, because it basically dipped down 99%, hit a bottom, stayed there for a few months, and then ripped back up. And that's exactly what's happened. And so even though you can look at the total return, let's say it's the equivalent of 40 bucks a share after the split, which it has been trading at, then you're basically talking a 2x in the share price from under 20 cents a share. And that's from October 2024 and beyond, September 2024 and beyond. And so there's always going to be that opportunity in the market to make the returns that you're seeking. But what type of risk are you willing to take? Because when we're talking about volatility, remember, even though the share price might be up double from where it was back in October of 2024, and yes, that's less than 1 year, and yes, that could be considered 100% return in less than 1 year, and yes, that's a good return relative to the S&P 500, right? But that return can change like that. It can change quickly. And so there's no telling what's going to happen to TNXP stock, besides the fact that it previously was a penny stock, did a 1 for 100 reverse split, now is on the NASDAQ. It was on the NASDAQ originally, but it had to do that reverse split to stay on the NASDAQ essentially. And even though it is trading and kind of sidelining for a while, it has been sidelining, it has been trending upward in anticipation of their news, which if you guys have tuned into this stock and the channel, you guys know that the news is related to the TNX 102SL drug, fibromyalgia, which is a huge market, and the market can absolutely expand rapidly. You know, we have a $3 to $4 billion market. Who's to say that can't go to 5 or 10 billion in the coming years? And being the first drug that really has a substantial chance to make an impact in the last 15 years, TNXP 102SL potentially stands out as a significant milestone for the fibromyalgia market. So it's exciting. It really is. And so if you're looking at this, you can say, well, I'm going to tune in. I'm going to try to get invested. I'm going to try to see if this thing 5X's or 10X's, but maybe it doesn't, right? And so keep in mind that I'm not your financial advisor. I'm not the person who makes the decisions for your portfolio. You know, I do have my finance degree. I'm about to graduate with my MBA, but nonetheless, you know, I previously worked as a Series 7 licensed broker and all that, but I'm not your financial advisor. So keep that in mind, because when it comes to achieving your goals in the market and whatever you're trying to achieve, there's nothing that's going to substitute hard work and dedication and really just consistency. When I say dedication, I mean consistency. You know, always investing in the markets, no matter what the goals are, no matter what the long-term goals are or the short-term goals. Set a long-term goal, set something that you can achieve over the next 20 years, because you're going to be thankful when you have some set, you know, sort of goal to achieve versus nothing. And it's better to have something versus nothing, right? You better have some kind of goal over the next 20 years that you're focused on. Just like myself, for example, getting my MBA. I've always wanted to get my master's, and it's kind of been, you know, inside of me for a long time. Even though I've hated college, I always thought that getting a better education, I knew my parents always preached the idea, was going to be a good idea. And so I decided to get my master's degree. I'm about to graduate. But has it been stressful? Yes. You know, having a family, having 3 kids, having a wife, absolutely. But I set the goal. And so you have to set the goal financially. But don't set your sights so much on money, but more than, you know, money, what can you do with the money once you've achieved the goal you've sought? And so that's what you want to focus on. And when it comes to this financially, you know, TNXP could go up 10x. If it does, if you invest $10,000 and it goes up to 100,000 plus, what are you planning on doing with the money? Are you going to pay off your mortgage? Are you going to invest in, you know, dividend stocks? Or are you going to invest in something that will benefit you in the long term? Because if you have a lot of money to invest and you get lucky, quote unquote, in the stock market, if you're blessed, for example, then potentially you should take that money and use it for, you know, something beneficial for your family, for whatever it is that your long-term goals are. So that's the point, right? Always remember that your long-term goals are going to triumph any short-term goals you might have. And so if you can make $100,000 in the stock market, what could that long-term goal do for you in terms of cash flow, in terms of earning income and retirement? If you invest $100,000 at the age of 30, what does that look like at the age of 50? Think about it. You know, it could be multi-millions with inflation. You never know, right? So there's always an opportunity out there. There's always risk. You have to factor in the risk you're taking versus the opportunity you're taking. And what is the trade-off? Is the opportunity worth the risk? That's the question you always have to ask yourself, no matter who you're working with. And the financial advisor you're working with might try to accumulate fees. They might try to be the one who is making money off you, so be it. But if that's the case, you have to be the one asking the question, what benefit or what return are we really getting for this advice, you know? And so always ask that question. But with that being said, I want to thank you for tuning into this video. Thank you all for tuning into the channel. And as we discuss TNXP stock, I hope you guys are all doing well out there. God bless America. God bless everybody out there. God bless, you know, this beautiful July day out in Southern Illinois. The fact that I can come outside and make a video is just a blessing. And I want to thank you all for tuning into this video, guys. Truly. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we will see you guys in the next one. Take care.